A very good evening to all our dear audience today. I'm Dr. Kirat Kaur Sibia from the north, from Mohali, Punjab, and I am delighted to welcome you today to our hot and burning topic COVID vaccines and boosters. I would like to begin by thanking our founder trustee, Dr. N.H. Krishna, for this opportunity and thanking Dr. Narayana Pradeep, co founder trustee. And I would also like to thank our National Secretary, Dr. Ravi Dosi, Dr. Narendra Methuku, the National President, and Dr. Vijay Kumar Chetty, who is our webinar academic director. It is because of the untiring efforts of the CCI team and family that we are here together every Thursday and really enjoying this academic feast. I would also like to thank our academic partners, CIPLA, for their continued support. So today we are going to talk about COVID vaccines and boosters. And I would like to begin by asking a question, that is why we need to talk about COVID vaccine boosters at this point of time. So recently I had this patient, or rather a person who consulted me. He was a 50-year-old male and he consulted regarding the need to get a booster shot. He had gotten his second dose of Covishield at about 6 months back and was to travel to USA in about 20 days' time. He had no history of any comorbidity. So this gentleman's queries were whether he should get a booster shot at all, whether he should get the booster shot in India or at US, since he was traveling to US. Will the booster shot at US be better? And but would it be a good idea to fly out from India without a booster shot and have all the exposure with the international travel? Also, he asked that will he even be allowed to enter US without a booster? So I thought this is a classical case where we are having someone who thinks that the foreign vaccine would be better, and maybe he has the option to go and get one when he goes there. But from the other side of the globe, I was contacted by a microbiologist from Canada, and she had her own set of concerns. She had received both doses of Pfizer vaccine at about 9 months back, and she was planning to travel to India along with her parents in a few weeks' time. Her queries were, should they get the booster dose in Canada or in India? And would Covaxin be a better booster than the mRNA vaccine, given that it's a whole virion inactivated vaccine and will elicit immune response, not just to spike protein, but various other surface antigens? Or is the risk of travel too much and they should take whatever booster is available there and only then travel to India? So we had this fine lady and she had her own set of concerns, which were, I feel, quite well founded. So today we will talk about the COVID basics, like the strains, the vaccines, and most importantly, reach up to the boosters. The SARS-CoV intra-agency group, they have been continued to update their classification of the variants as and when they were discovered, and then they continue to monitor them. So we need to have a basic idea that we have the groups where we have the variants being monitored. So these are the variants which were at some time variants of concern, but now their circulation is either very low in the population, or they are not as much of a threat. But we continue to monitor them, and specifically for any new mutations. So we have the alpha variant, which was discovered in the UK. Then we have the beta variant. So this lineage was from South Africa. We have the gamma, the Brazil, that is the Brazil or Japan origin variant. And we have the other variants, which have not been so much in the news, but yes, they do exist. But they're in low circulation in the population, and they're being monitored. Then we have the variant of concern. Delta was a variant of concern, and the newly added to this list is the Omicron. Why is it important to know what variant we are dealing with? It is important because changes in specific genetic markers are associated with changes in receptor binding and neutralizing capabilities, and further on. And this impacts diagnostics, treatments, and vaccines. So the different variants will show a difference in level of transmissibility. For example, we knew that the Delta was more transmissible, and we have similar concerns that Omicron would have even greater transmissibility. Then this would also impact the different variants will cause disease of different severity. For example, we knew that Delta was causing disease of greater severity. And for Omicron, we are still not seeing a greater severity disease as per the news coming in from South Africa. Then there's a differential neutralization of antibodies, differential neutralization by antibodies generated during previous infection or vaccination. Differential vaccine-induced protection from severe disease. So vaccine could be more effective for some variants and less effective for other variants. There is a difference with diagnostic test targets. That means that some variants will be easily identified, while some will need genomic sequencing and not be just identified on RT-PCR. And there is also a difference in susceptibility to the different classes of therapies available. Vaccines are crucial in limiting spread of the virus and minimizing severe disease. Rather, vaccines are the most effective intervention known to control disease and make a difference in healthcare system. The COVID-19 vaccines are highly effective at preventing severe disease and death, including against the Delta variant. But they are not 100% effective. Some fully vaccinated people will still become infected, and this is known as a breakthrough infection. However, for all people, the vaccine provides the best protection against serious illness and death. Data suggests that lower effectiveness is seen against confirmed infection and symptomatic disease caused by the Beta, Gamma, and Delta variants compared with the ancestral strain and Alpha variant. Lower vaccine effectiveness is seen in immunocompromised people, and that's why ongoing monitoring of vaccine effectiveness against variants and boosters is needed. We have to think beyond cell-mediated immunity. That is, we have to think beyond the antibody titers. So studies have observed modest or no defect in cellular immune recognition of the variants. Thus, cellular immunity may help limit disease severity in infections caused by variants that partially escape neutralizing antibodies. Coming to the types of vaccines, we have currently 3 types of vaccines. We have the mRNA platform vaccines like the Pfizer and Moderna BioNTech vaccine. We have the protein subunit vaccines or the whole virion-killed vaccines like Covaxin. And we have the vector vaccines, that is AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Basically, I would like to point out here that the mRNA vaccines, the mRNA is being introduced or is being put into lipid nanoparticles, and that is being injected. In the vector proteins, we have the adenovirus, in which the SARS-CoV mRNA is there, and that is injected. Multiple studies from Europe have examined the immunogenicity of a heterologous or mixed series of COVID-19 vaccines. These studies found that receipt of a dose of AstraZeneca's adenovirus vector vaccine, followed by a dose of mRNA vaccine, induced a robust immune response and was at least as immunogenic as 2 doses of mRNA vaccines by most measures of immune response. One study examined vaccine effectiveness of this heterologous series and estimated an effectiveness of 88% against any SARS-CoV infection 2 weeks following mRNA second dose. Only one study examined a heterologous series in which the mRNA vaccine was the first dose. In this study, they found that the dose of Pfizer BioNTech vaccine followed by a dose of AstraZeneca did not achieve non-inferiority of immune response when compared with 2 doses of Pfizer BioNTech. That is, 2 doses of mRNA was just as good as one mRNA followed by AstraZeneca. A single study to date examined the heterologous dosing with a primary mRNA vaccine series followed by a dose of the Janssen adenovirus vector vaccine, that is the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And they noted a substantially increased immune response against SARS-CoV after the third dose. So we are there at a place where you can choose your COVID-19 vaccine as per the the COVID vaccine booster. You can choose it as per the vaccine type that you originally received, or you can even choose a different vaccine booster. And now we have the CDC's recommendations for this. We are also now at a point in time where we have the data which supports the need for a booster shot. Studies show that after getting vaccinated against COVID-19, protection against the virus and the ability to prevent infection with the Delta variant may decrease over time. Although COVID-19 vaccination for older adults remains effective in preventing severe disease, recent data suggest vaccination is less effective at preventing infection or milder illness with symptoms over time. So this is the latest study from which was published in JAMA Internal Medicine, and they concluded that the third dose was significantly effective in improving immunity and preventing illness and hospitalization. And also they demonstrated that there was a fall or there was a waning of immunity over time, and thus the need for a third dose. Emerging evidence also shows that among the healthcare and frontline workers, vaccine effectiveness against COVID-19 infection is decreasing over time. This lower effectiveness is likely due to combination of decreasing protection as time passes since getting vaccinated, as well as greater infectiousness of the Delta variant. Data from small clinical trials show that vaccine effectiveness against COVID-19 infection is waning after the primary series, but protection remains high against severe disease and hospitalization. Clinical trial data show a booster shot of Pfizer BioNTech's COVID-19 vaccine is effective in protecting against COVID-19, adding to other evidence demonstrating that a booster shot may result in increased effectiveness compared to primary vaccination. And so we continue to learn and explore. Thank you very much. Now let us carry on to our Q&A session. So now let us continue with our Q&A session. Dear CCI audience and CCI family, I would like to begin by introducing our panelists for the session today. We have senior chest physician and renowned interventional pulmonologist from Mumbai, Dr. Pratibha Singhal. Ma'am has just completed her tenure as secretary at the Interventional Pulmonology Group at the European Respiratory Society. Ma'am, we are proud of your achievements.
Thank you.
And welcome you to this panel discussion. Ma'am is practicing at Bombay Hospital and HN Reliance Hospital, Mumbai. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you.
I would like to now introduce our second panelist for the day. We have Dr. Tanushree Gehlot with us, who is consultant physician and head of department at Yatharth Hospital, Greater Noida. Dr. Tanushree has special interest in interventional pulmonology, and we are delighted to have Dr. Tanushree with us today. Welcome, Dr. Tanushree Gehlot.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Our third panelist for the day is dear Dr. Stuti Gupta. Dr. Stuti is a well-known academician in CCI Circle. Dr. Stuti is from New Delhi, and we are very happy to have Dr. Stuti with us today. Welcome, Dr. Stuti.
Thank you, ma'am. It's an honor to be here.
All right. So I would like to begin our session with our first question for Dr. Pratibha. Ma'am, what is a COVID-19 vaccine booster?
Okay. First of all, thank you, Kirat, for the lovely introduction. I thank CCI for inviting me for this very interesting panel discussion, which, to be honest, made me also read a lot more about it because it's something that is still new, it is still evolving. So before I answer your question, Kirat, I think just a small background of why we are having this discussion. I think there is data from the US, which despite mRNA vaccines originally having up to 94% efficacy, they are seeing 64% breakthrough infections in the US. And there is a interesting data from Massachusetts, which has said that 35% of patients in the hospital were fully vaccinated patients at some point in time. And even the viral load in vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals was same. The only difference was that vaccinated individuals, the viral load decreased very rapidly. So infection, the transmission rates would probably be lesser in vaccinated individuals. Also, we all know, but just to recapitalize that in vaccinated individuals, probability of going on the ventilator is low, up to 7.7%, whereas in unvaccinated, it could be as high as 23%. And of course, mortality is much lower in vaccinated individuals. There was an interesting data which I read, which said that in fully vaccinated individuals, the median age of mortality of patients was in the elderly, that is 82 years. So the good thing out of all this is that even though we are talking so much about booster and everyone is worried, the mortality in doubly vaccinated individuals is still not as high in the younger age group. It is still limited to people who are elderly and who have other comorbid disease. So coming to that now, to answer your question, Kirat, what is booster dose? So booster dose is defined by various societies as an additional dose that is given to people who are fully vaccinated with the previous recommended doses. Say, for example, for the mRNA vaccines and our own Covishield, Covaxin, there are two recommendations as a primary vaccination schedule. In the Johnson & Johnson, there is a single dose as a recommendation for the primary schedule. So any patient, any person who has received 2 doses of the mRNA vaccine or 2 doses of Covaxin, Covishield, or the Oxford vaccine, or a single dose of the J&J vaccine and is now going to get an additional dose is what is called as booster dose.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Pratibha. So basically, anyone who has received the primary course of vaccination and has covered some timing beyond that, we suspect there's a waning of the immune response, immunity. So these are the people where the concept for a booster came in. So I would like to ask Dr. Tanushri, as a pulmonologist, who would you say is a candidate for COVID-19 booster dose? And I would like to share with all of you, this is bewildering that I have received more than 150 queries by now. And I think we've only covered the first question. And a lot of these queries are that, see, somebody like Dr. Suryanshu Dutt Sharma, for example, from Bulandshahr is saying, I got my first dose of Covishield in Jan, second in Feb, when should I get third? And numerous such questions. I think even if I have to mention the names of the people quickly, Dr. Himangi Dhavle, Maharashtra, Mumbai, Dr. Pankaj B. Takkar, from Bengal, that is from Maharashtra, Mumbai again. Sumona Banerjee, West Bengal. Dr. Amol Patil, Maharashtra. Some Naru from Delhi who's saying that I'm 70 years old and asthmatic. I've taken doses. What is your advice? Mr. Naru, we cannot give a personalized advice on a webinar, but we hope that you will find this webinar helpful and you will consult your treating pulmonologist. So also Kesar Singh Mewawat, Rajasthan, Jaipur. So this is just to name a few. Dr. Brahmeshwar Kot. So they're all asking questions about, and they're telling what vaccines they've taken and what advice we have for them. So we cannot, I think it's bewildering that we've received so many queries already. It's not possible to individually advise, but I'm very sure as our discussion unfolds, everyone will find their answers. So Dr. Tanushri, I was asking you that who would be a candidate for COVID-19 booster dose?
Ma'am, on the behest of this question, I would like to start off with the fact that there are actually two concepts. One is of additional dose and one is of booster dose. So we should not confuse between the two. Additional dose is something that might be required by a person who might not have generated enough immune response in his body following the first two doses, and subsequently that person requires an additional dose. And the booster dose that is the topic of discussion today is, as Dr. Pratibha has already told, that the person who has waning immunity. So waning immunity can happen in all age groups across all the patient population. But on specific regard, if someone asks you whether the person needs a booster dose, we have to see the logistic epidemiology, and according to that, patient on priority for a booster dose will be those having age group of around more than 65 years of age, and below 65 years of age of those who are in special settings like daycare settings and occupationally high exposure groups. So these age groups and these population cohort are the ones which require a booster dose, because they are at a higher exposure risk towards COVID-19, and their immunity might be waning off. So for newer variants and the waning immunity, therefore they require the booster dose. But coming on to the generalized population, we have data on the Pfizer and Moderna. So they are recommending it because of the breakthrough infection, and Dr. Pratibha has already told us, and the ones who are not generating enough immune response. So basically, we have to differentiate whether a patient needs an additional dose or a booster dose. Not everyone qualifies for a booster dose, but yes, there are many who might be requiring an additional dose. And the scheduling and the dosage of both also vary. So we have to first decide among that.
Thank you, Dr. Tanushree. You elaborated very well. Let me reiterate that as per the FDA guidelines, which by the around 20th of October, the advisory was that people who are more than 65 years of age are the candidates for COVID-19 vaccine. Secondly, people who are above 18 years of age, but having comorbidities or at risk of contracting COVID-19 or severe COVID-19, they are candidates. And third group is people who are at increased risk of contracting the disease by the virtue of their increased exposure to the disease, like healthcare workers. But by mid-November, FDA has revised their advisory and has included all groups to say that anyone who is above 18 years of age is eligible to be a candidate for COVID-19 booster vaccine. Am I right, Dr. Tanushree? Yes, thank you.
Yes.
So let me come to Dr. Stuti. Dr. Stuti, for a person who is eligible candidate for COVID-19 booster vaccine, what is the optimal time to go in for or to decide or think about planning a booster?
The outset, ma'am, I would really like to thank all the CCI faculty members for having me on this platform. Ma'am, coming to the question, ma'am, there's a mix and match between different countries, and what I'm answering is a composite of what the different countries have given the guidelines as. For the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, it's 6 months after we have completed the primary series. For Johnson & Johnson's vaccine, it is 2 months after the primary vaccination. And in that case, the primary vaccination is 1 dose only, so 2 months after your first dose. Now, ma'am, coming to UK has approved Covishield Estrenzia's vaccine. So for them, they have the guidelines that has been given by UK Medicine and Healthcare Product Regulatory Agency says that their preference for booster is either a Moderna vaccine or a Pfizer vaccine 6 months. But for the patients who don't want to opt for either of the vaccine, they can go for a Covishield at 6 months. Because of the logistic reasons, they are even offering the vaccine at as early as 4 months and 5 months, especially to the vulnerable group and people who are living in long-term healthcare. From what I read from China about the China map, China has also introduced booster shots and they have made it mandatory, especially for the construction workers and healthcare workers. It's mandatory for the people, they have their own built-in vaccines, which are the Sinopharm vaccine, Sinovac vaccine, and CanSino vaccine. And after the initial primary series are over, after 6 months, it's mandatory for these particular groups to take another booster shot. But for the time being, they've written it for one booster dose.
So you were saying that China also has mandated boosters. China
Yes,
alone has, mandated boosters.
Yes, ma'am.
But
just
their
for
booster shot is also
construction
at 6
workers.
months. Is also at 6 months, right?
Yes, ma'am. But just for construction workers and healthcare.
Healthcare
Because they don't want to, because of the winter beaching, winter
So,
games.
and coming to the US based vaccines for Pfizer and Moderna, 6 months after the second dose is the optimal time for a booster. And for Johnson & Johnson or the Janssen vaccine, which is a single dose vaccine, after the single dose of vaccine itself, they're saying 2 months after the vaccine is the time for booster, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Can I add something, Kirat? I think
Please, ma'am.
Australia has also said that the booster, ideally Pfizer vaccine, if not available, then the adenovector virus vaccine. I think that is what some of these guidelines that are available. And I think many other countries have started booster other than UK, US, China, and many countries. Israel, of course. Then I was reading Spain, Turkey, lot of other places also have started booster vaccinations.
Thank you.
In fact, I think there's 10 countries probably.
Yes. So, ma'am, thank you for adding that. I would like to now come to Dr. Pratibha. Dr. Pratibha, what is the difference between COVID vaccine and additional COVID vaccine and a booster vaccine dose?
I think Tanushree has already very nicely kind of elucidated to that. So basically, additional vaccine is what is been recommended in the US and some other countries for immunocompromised patients who do not mount an adequate immune response after the second dose, and they have been advised to give a third dose as an additional dose 28 days after the second dose. But that is for only a very specific subgroup of immunocompromised patients who are known not to mount an adequate response with 2 doses. So that comes as part of their primary vaccination sequence itself. It is not a booster for these specific subset of population. A booster is when they have completed their primary sequence. So in these immunocompromised individuals, or occasionally in other subsets, it may be 3 doses, and then the 4th dose will be a booster for them. Whereas in the normal healthy population, the 3rd dose will be a booster if they are taking the mRNA or the the adenovirus vector vaccines like Oxford or Covishield, or if they are taking the whole virion inactivated vaccines like Covaxin, and a single dose of the Janssen vaccine.
Thank you, Dr. Pratibha. I would like Dr. Tanushree to further elaborate on this. So, Dr. Tanushree, what would be that set of people, as Dr. Pratibha said, that there is a set of people who do not elicit the required immune response after primary vaccination consisting of 2 doses, and for such people, a 3rd dose is advised, and to get the optimal immune response. So what is the subset of people, Dr. Tanushree, who are advised to get an additional dose of COVID vaccine?
Ma'am, as per the FDA and the CDC advisories, what we have read about is that the additional doses are required for those who are having specific conditions like patients of cancer who are on chemotherapy, the ones which are having primary immunodeficiency like degorge and all, and some of the patients which are on immunodeficiency suppressants drugs, and as well as primary immunodeficiencies like HIV as also acquired ones. And these are I think these are the ones we also, the renal transplant patients and the patients which we find as a subset, which are already having an acquired immunodeficiency. So they are expected to have a diluted or a minor response towards the first dose. So they have considered, advised as such, FDA, that these are the subset which you need to give a additional shot, so that they are at a better place immunity wise, so that the immune spikes are well off, so that they can fight off the infection.
So what would be the timing for the additional dose?
Ma'am, is usually for Moderna and Pfizer is usually between the 28th day only. The additional dose that needs to be given, unlike the booster dose which were given at the 6 months interval, because that's the time the immune response will be generated as per requirement.
All right. So, Dr. Tanushree, you have wonderfully covered all aspects. For our audience, I would quickly repeat that or reiterate that anyone, when we say who's immunocompromised, we mean someone who's on chronic steroids, someone who has primary or acquired immune deficiency, or to say more particularly, patients with HIV who have high viral load, low high viral load, low CD4 count, or have not started ART as of now yet. So these patients, then patients who have stem cell therapy, patients who are organ transplant, who are on chemotherapy, especially for tumors, and who are having hematological malignancies, they are at greater risk. So this is the subset of people who are eligible for an additional dose, because we suspect that they might not have elicited the required immune response with 2 doses. So the third dose is given at 28 days, and it becomes a part of their primary vaccination only, as Dr. Pratibha pointed out. So I would like to next ask Dr. Stuti. Dr. Stuti, what is, patients come to us and doctors also talk about, somebody talks about FDA guidelines or advisory, somebody talks about CDC guidelines. So what is the difference between the two?
Ma'am, basically FDA is an advisory body which looks into the data, which collects the preliminary data, and we can just put it up for as an advisory to the CDC. And the CDC is the one which is going to vet through the data, going to look at the feasibility, and also going to see the practicality of it, looking into the long-term picture of it. So CDC is the one which gives the guideline. FDA is the one which generates the FDA. And FDA has generated many advisories, like one on 20th November, then 19th November, 23rd November. So they have given frequent advisories regarding these booster doses. Ultimately, as a clinician, we need to look more at the CDC guidelines and follow these and try to iterate this with our seeds.
Very wonderfully told, Dr. Stuti. Basically, FDA does not issue any guidelines. FDA only gives advisory based on whatever studies they receive or they are monitoring. They can give emergency approval for vaccines to be used as boosters, but they cannot give a guideline that so and so booster is can be used. They will advise it in their advisory to the CDC. The CDC will go through it, and once the CDC director seals it and approves it, then it becomes a guideline to be followed by the physician. So we do not directly follow FDA guidelines. We keep checking their updates on advisory, but we follow the CDC guidelines. Very well said, Dr. Stuti. Now I would like to ask, so many questions and they're overlapping, but I'll just try to cover, so Rajan Unadkat from Maharashtra, Mumbai. Ma'am, Dr. Pratibha, you can take this question. He's asking, any antibody titers required to be done before receiving booster dose? And he's also asking, any cut-off levels of antibody titers for receiving booster dose? And this question has been repeated umpteen times. I am only Ranjan Unnadkat. I've been able to mention his name. But with respect to all those other people from the audience who have asked this question, please, Dr. Pratibha, address this question.
So I think when we look at the data, all the studies mention antibody titers. It is not a very accurate indicator of the immune response, because eventually the immune response, the cell-mediated immunity is what is important for controlling infection. But that is very difficult to detect by an immunological assay, which is why antibody titers are an surrogate marker for cell-mediated immunity. And that is why most of the studies look at the antibody titers when they are studying vaccine efficacy. However, in real life scenario, what they have found is that antibody titers are neither very accurate of assessing a patient's level of cell mediated immunity. So that basically means if you have high levels, it does not mean that you are not going to get a COVID infection. At the same time, if you have low levels, it doesn't mean that you are definitely going to catch a COVID infection. So in short, basically, antibody levels are not a good answer or a good indicator to assess whether you should be getting a booster dose or not. I think there are various other criteria which we are going to discuss and which is already being discussed about the high risk population, where irrespective of the levels which don't who don't generate a good immune response, which is basically targeted at cell mediated immunity rather than just the antibody levels. So I'm not sure that antibody levels are a good marker for deciding that you should take the booster. Neither is there a cutoff value to decide. I think this has all been designed more at levels of cellular level, where people who are more likely to be susceptible to moderate to severe infection. So I think we are targeting patients who are susceptible to get moderate to severe infections despite being vaccinated with the primary vaccination schedule, is what I have understood from all my extensive reading about all what is being recommended all over the world. Yes, very rightly, Dr. Kirat said that FDA has recently changed its its advisory and said that all people in the US are eligible above 18 to get the booster doses. But if you still look at the CDC, it is still talking about elderly population and susceptible population. And there is data which is telling us from the CDC, if you go on the website, which says that when they studied healthcare workers over time who had received booster doses, their response was not any different. It was basically age directed. So if you are at an older age, okay, the likelihood of you having, it's basically more to do with your age. So I think there are multiple people who have asked this question that I'm so old, I'm XYZ is my age, when should I take a booster or not? So I think that is basically the criteria is more to do with the age more than 65. There is not enough data that has been said about specifically whether healthcare workers are specifically at increased risk. It is more to do with the age group. So eventually we are all coming back to the elderly population.
Yes, ma'am. With all due respect to our audience, I like to mention their names because of the great respect I have for them. So I would like to mention Partha Sarthik from Pudukkottai, Tamil Nadu. He says he's 81 years old. Sir, you are watching us live. We do not know your health conditions. You had your he had his 2 shots of Covishield in Feb. He's asking when he should have a booster. Sir, you need to talk to your treating pulmonologist. It's very important because it is not one standard guideline. We have to take into consideration your overall health status. So,
could I add something about the antibody test?
Yes, please. Please, Dr. Stuti.
Ma'am, also there is a lot of variation in the antibody tests that are being offered in the markets. Some are total COVID antibodies, some are IgG, some are IgM. And there's also subsets of antibodies, like the neutralizing antibody is the one which we say is the most effective at neutralizing the virus and most protective. So we are not getting the direct neutralizing antibody titers with most of the tests. Some are doing total, some are doing neutralizing. So although the tests also are not very reliable indicator whether you have the immunity or not, and there is no cutoff value which is like, oh no, above this you will not get virus. I have 50, I will not get the virus.
Yes, Dr. Stuti. So I would like to bring into this discussion this message from question from Dipendra Bihar Patna. He's asking, what is the meaning of adequate immune response and how will you measure it? you can say that all person with immunocompromised condition should receive additional shot. So as we were just talking, what is adequate immune response? And as Dr. Stuti just mentioned, neutralizing antibodies. So I would like to further clarify on that, that there are two ways of measuring antibodies. One is the neutralizing method and other is the ELISA method. And there are some other, the neutralizing method is the one that is used for all research purposes. And ELISA is what we order generally or what we get when we order in our regular labs or standardized labs. Neutralizing titers are done only for, mostly for research purposes only. They're also done by some standardized national labs, but they're much more expensive. Now, the thing is that for even the studies which originally came to tell if the vaccines are effective or not, they only talked about antibody titers being achieved at so and so level, say 156 for Covishield or beyond 100, they said that it was elicited. But we do not know what is the validated titer for immunogenicity of a vaccine. That is, we do not know what level of antibody titer is good enough to say that this person has the adequate immune response. I'm using the words used by Dipinder because I'm trying to bring more clarity here, right? And the fact is that we still don't have a validated endpoint titer. And we know for sure that antibody response is not the only response that a vaccine brings in. And as Dr. Prati was talking about T-cell mediated immunity, the T-cell response is much more expensive to measure, done only in research purposes at research labs. So even if you do not have adequate antibody titers, you might still have a good T-cell immunity. So antibody titers as of now are not advised to factor in booster dose or no booster dose. So I would like to ask Dr. Tanushri. So there are also questions coming in where people want to know that in UK booster is vaccine, AstraZeneca is available. So they're asking questions regarding that. Dr. Tanushri, what do we learn from the UK experience of booster vaccine program?
See, ma'am, UK experience is very important to us because it's the country which has been using our Covishield counterpart Oxford vaccine. So rest of the data is mostly on the Pfizer and Moderna, though they have been using the same, but some of the data available on Covishield as far as I was able to search was from UK only. So it's a country which has amply implemented its booster program also. It has faced three major lockdowns in since the COVID came into being. This COVID-19 wave came into being, and it also recorded the highest level of deaths in Europe. So, but what we have seen that the cases have been there on a hike, but the mortality and the seriousness of the illness was recorded to be low post the booster shots. And also, ma'am, one more thing was there that they have also started with the booster vaccination program in their specialized settings of occupational exposure and the long daycare patients also. And they have realized that the susceptible population, this so-called susceptible population, had shown a good response towards the subsequent infections. So I'll definitely say that we are supposed to follow their guidelines if we have to. Then it's a successful program, though we can see that the rest of the Europe is going into lockdowns, especially Germany and all. But UK is running ahead in the cases, but the mortality and seriousness is on the lower side. So that's what I will say. And yes, the UK experience has a lot to learn from.
Thank you, Dr. Tanushri. So what you're saying basically is that even though the number of cases in UK have gone up, but the mortality is on the lower side. And this essentially this low mortality or low severity, that is averting hospitalization and death, is due to the fact that the population has been vaccinated. And
yes, ma'am. Actually, what we are seeing that they had their more peak in the summers basically. And now that we are entering the winters, the rest of the Europe, you can say the rest of the Europe minus UK is experiencing a surge, and the seriousness of the cases also. But where I can see various countries imposing lockdown, but everything is open in the holiday season in UK. Their pubs are open, their markets are open, and though they have mask restrictions and all, but definitely their restrictions levels are way less than the rest of the Europe. So something they have done differently. That's why they are behaving different from the rest of the Europe. And I think their successful booster program was one of the reasons why they are having less of the severity and mortality.
Thank you, Dr. Tanushri. I think
Add something?
I would like to take a moment to appreciate and applaud the scientists around the world who had this race against time and brought out this vaccine, because of which Europe is open, because of which we are, as a country, able to move about freely, and life has carried on. It had come to a stop. So, thanks to a sincere thanks to those scientists who brought out these vaccines for us.
Can I
So,
add something, Kirat?
Yes, ma'am, please.
So just quickly, I think because Tanushri was talking about the severe disease in UK, I think the important data here that we should definitely talk about is that a study from Lancet on Covishield specifically said that its efficacy against moderate to severe disease is as high as 81%. So I think eventually what we are targeting is at moderate to severe disease, right? I mean, mild disease is something that can be managed. It may also help us in herd immunity, but we are basically all over the world, what we are targeting is moderate to severe disease and mortality. So I think that is also important. There is good data. Also, there is data that the Oxford vaccine, which is Covishield is our counterpart, is also effective against some of these newer variants, including Delta, which I think was not seen as well in the mRNA vaccines. So I feel that is where also, Tanushri, I mean, am I right? Where, maybe that is the advantage that
Yes,
we have
ma'am,
also
because
had in our country,
yeah,
because when vaccination rates improved, in the latter part of the second wave, we were seeing, and as the wave was waning, we were seeing less severe disease. Like we were not seeing
yes, ma'am.
patients as many in the ICU.
Yeah, rest of the European
So we
countries are
must-
very hesitant in using the Oxford one,
Oxford
especially
vaccine,
in their
yes.
adults
Yes,
because of its
yes.
bleeding side effects
Bleeding
and all.
side effects,
But
yes.
Oxford and Covishield has shown good results. Yeah.
So I think we must give credit to what we have available in India as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I think what you're saying is absolutely right. And I understand that UK realized that the people who were elderly, above 60, they documented that their immunity was waning and they were at increased risk. And that's why when UK brought in their booster program, it was also brought in a phased manner. First of all, the elderly and the people who were at increased risk got the vaccine. Then people who were having comorbidities, they started receiving the booster. I'm talking about the booster, sorry, not the vaccine. And then finally, now that they have opened the next age group, and they've still not come to the plus 18 yet. It's like 50, 55, 45, 50 age group. Now they are giving the booster. So it's coming turn-wise. And they have done it in the same way in which they introduced the vaccine. Now I would like to ask Dr. Stuti. Dr. Stuti, what are the concerns regarding booster vaccine in our community?
And we have had a mixed response. There are people who are like really excited and really want to go for the booster dose. But there's a substantial proportion who are like really concerned about the vaccine, and not just in health terms, not just the short term side effects, not the serious side effects, long term side effects, also about what it means for their employment and traveling abroad and their work opportunities abroad. So, coming to the health factors, obviously there are minor side effects, but the main issue with the Moderna and Pfizer, which had been a sore thorn in their vaccine campaign, had been myocarditis and pericarditis. I am referring a paper from NEGM, which was done by Whitworth J. et al. And they have specifically mentioned that the risk of myocarditis is less than, in male population specifically, which are less than 30 years, it's almost 10.69 per 1 lakh population. And in between, there was an advisory in France which said that the Moderna booster or the Moderna primary should be restricted for people above 30 years, especially male. So one concern is regarding the myocarditis and pericarditis, and especially in people who might be suffering from congenital heart disease or another sort of structural heart disease. Especially in country like ours, where there's a good proportion of patients suffering from rheumatic heart disease. Second thing is, ma'am, we don't have any long-term studies regarding these vaccines. There had always, I'm not a vaccine critic or maybe not as an anti-vax, but there are always concerns about the risk of autoimmune diseases later on, efficacy of other vaccines later on, especially with the vaccines which are using viral vectors. And then again, regarding the autoimmune diseases and fertility. Although generally we have seen in the last 100 years of modern medicine, generally these biases have been unfounded, but still there does remain a concern, and especially for a product that's been used so worldwide and recommended for almost everyone. Now it's been recommended even for children who are 5+. Maybe our schools will depend on it. And then in terms of long-term concern, ma'am, there is always issue with traveling abroad because every country has their own vaccine which they have approved. So like if I'm from India, there's a travel restriction for me to travel somewhere. Visa requirements are different. People, especially people who are working abroad and their families back are in India, they're having difficulty to go back and meet their families. There was recently a news article when the US UK opened. So like there were like literally pictures of people meeting after 1.5 years because there were so many travel restrictions. So the main concerns regarding the vaccine is that first of all, there's no equity in the vaccine distribution and the hegemony among the countries regarding the acceptance of vaccines. Which one is going to accept which one? So that's like a really you have to for each and every country and what they want. So that I think is the main concern.
Yes, Dr. Stuti, I understand that there are many myths in the society that need to be addressed, that must be addressed, like concerns about fertility. We have so far not had any data that reports that there is any effect on fertility by these vaccines. Then things about long-term, problems. All these vaccines are being monitored, and just because, and this is a newer platform, but there has been enough safety data collected and scrutinized before they were brought out. So I would say that it's very important that all the myths in the community about safety of the vaccines, at least, it is high time. I think it is high time it goes away. And the other concern with autoimmune diseases, that is a very real concern, but that is a concern which is with all vaccines. 1 in 1 million, 1 in 10 lakh. If that data is there, which we are publishing, that data is still, the risk is less and the benefit is more. And I think it is very clear. Also, I've observed that the distrust or the doubts regarding to vaccine, they come up when the pandemic is on the lower side. But when we are peaking and people are dying left and right, at that time, people just want a vaccine. And at that time, nobody says, is the vaccine good enough? Iske baad mujhe kuch dikkat to nahi hoga, right? Tab nahi people, and that we have had times when, we have seen vaccine shortages. So that doubt comes when the vaccine is available in surplus and the cases are on the lower side and there is an option and we feel so we'll think about it if we want it or not. But when things get serious, then we realize, oh, vaccine is a lifesaver. So I think we have to be very clear about it, that the vaccines in general are known to be the most effective intervention in healthcare, which have, we're able to control measles, smallpox, polio because of vaccines. And now we are getting better at it. So I would again like to applaud the scientists who brought us here. And we as doctors have a role to play in dispersing the myths surrounding vaccines. We cannot afford to have a low coverage. We cannot afford that. We as doctors got the vaccines, first of all. It shows that we have faith in science. Why would we ever advise anybody otherwise? When we are going in for vaccines, it's because we have faith in them. Dr.
Very well said,
Pratibha,
ma'am. Very well said.
I would like to, on the same note, ask you, what are the side effects of vaccine? Because yes, we are very bold to go ahead with them because we understand that the risk of not taking a vaccine is much higher. But yes, we have to be aware about the side effects as well. So could you please tell us about that?
So I think quickly side effects of vaccines, as we all know, there could be fever, headache, malaise. Uh, but specifically, what has been seen with booster doses has been there have been incidences of rash. There has been an increased incidence of lymphadenopathy after the booster doses. These are some of the side effects that have been noticed, which are different from what has been seen with the primary vaccination schedule. Of course, I mean, having a mild viral-like illness like having, nausea or having fever, malaise, pain at the injection site, these have all been, talked about as part of the primary vaccination schedule also. But some of the things that have been seen more with the booster doses have been lymphadenopathy and rash is something what I was reading with. And the interesting thing I wanted to add with what Stuti and you were talking about was that interestingly, what when we talk about vaccine efficacy, somehow that never got advertised as well as all the side effects in the media.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
so I think that is also a responsibility that should be taken up more ferociously about the fact that we are decreasing the incidence of severe infections with the vaccination, even with just the 2 doses. So that is very, very important to go out as a message to the community.
I think the message that needs to go out to the community very clearly, and this is totally based on the science that we have, is that the vaccines are helpful in preventing, are effective in preventing severe disease requiring hospitalization and death. Vaccines are not going to stop infection, are not going to stop someone from contracting infection. So, COVID appropriate behavior, wearing masks, following social distancing, avoiding gatherings, this has to become a part of the social behavior. And I think the only thing which is probably as effective or just as important as getting a vaccine is following the COVID appropriate behavior. Cannot stress this any lesser than getting a vaccine, because vaccine will prevent you from severe disease, but it cannot prevent you from catching the disease. So I would like to now come to Dr. Tanushri. Dr. Tanushri, we have given you quite a break.
Yeah.
Dr. Tanushri, can we mix the vaccine brands for booster dose? And also, does the booster dose have to be from the same platform of vaccine as the one used for primary vaccination? For example, if someone has had an mRNA vaccine, can they get Covaxin or can they get the adenovector vaccine? Can we change those? And can we mix the brands? Can a Moderna person get a Pfizer? Can a Pfizer person get a Moderna? How do you go about all this?
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. It's a very interesting question and a very commonly asked question in the chat box also, that whether we can go ahead mixing the two vaccines that we have already taken, because now that the traveling is open and the patient and the people are traveling from one country to another, so this is a very commonly asked question that we get from our patients also. So basically, no, the simple answer is you can mix the two vaccines. If you have been vaccinated with Moderna, Pfizer or Janssen, you can go ahead with the another vaccine. Even the same applies for the Covaxin and the Covishield, because I was going through a series of trials and policy that were going on. In fact, we have seen that those who have received a Pfizer after a Moderna dose completion or a Moderna after a Pfizer completion, it was a quite a boost in their immune response as compared to the same brand vaccination. I was recently going through a study in which Pfizer was followed by a Pfizer booster and a Moderna booster. So there was relatively better response in those who were getting a cross vaccination. So definitely a mix of vaccination can be done. It depends on whether you are getting a particular brand at your place. So there is no contraindication cross branding your vaccination. And what was the second question, ma'am? Can you repeat that?
Like, can you change the platform? Can you mix the brand, but can you mix the platform? Say somebody's got a Moderna, can they get like mRNA vaccine? Can they get
a vector
a vaccine from another vaccine?
Yeah, even in that scenario also, I've already mentioned that you can go with changing the platform. Probably the changing of platform give you an enhanced immunity also. Some of the studies are coming up with that also, that one probably the immune response with one platform was XYZ, and with the other one you got a better response that added to the immune response from the previous one. So definitely the cross branding and the vector or the platform changing can also happen. It is very much documented and successfully implemented in other countries.
Thank you, Dr. Tanushri. So what you answered, I'm like, because I'm randomly looking at the questions that I'm receiving. I've received plus 700 questions by now, and it's overwhelming. So the question that you just asked and is also in response to basically what a question Mr. R. Kailasam question. He also asked this only. Tamil Nadu. He's from Tuticorin. I like to mention the names of our audience. I can't mention everybody's name, but I want to appreciate that they are so interested in this topic, and we are trying to bring you the best evidence-based, information that we have as of now. So his question was, is there any study for cross-reactivity with vaccination? As you just said, that anyone who's had a Pfizer or Moderna can go in for second dose of AstraZeneca. And yes, mixing of brands and mixing of platforms has been found to be non-inferior to using the same, repeating the same brand or same platform. Now I would like to ask a question to Dr. Stuti. Dr. Stuti, is there any difference in the dosage for vaccination and for booster?
Ma'am, for the Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson and the Covishield, there is no difference in the dose that is to be given for the booster as compared to the primary series. However, in the case of Moderna, they had trials and they found that the half the dose, 50 microgram dose, was what they were suggesting for booster. So only in the case of Moderna vaccine, the booster dose is halved. Rest for Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Covishield, all of these, the dose is same.
Yes, thank you very much. Here I would like to reiterate that the side effects were only the myocarditis and pericarditis was found to be lower with the booster compared to the second dose for Moderna. And they thought that when they found that with the booster, the Moderna, they found some side effects of axillary lymph nodes. They decided to decrease the second dose to half, or the vaccine booster dose to half, and they found that the immunogenicity was well maintained. Now, I would like to come to Dr. Pratibha ma'am. Dr. Pratibha, what pediatric age group is eligible for COVID-19 vaccines as per the CDC? I see that a lot of our audience is very concerned for their children. So a lot of questions coming in for the same.
Yeah.
Could you please throw some light
as,
on the same?
Yeah. So as per the CDC, I think 5 years and above is what they have approved for the mRNA vaccines. In our own country, Covaxin was recently approved for more than 2 years of age by the expert committee. However, I think it is still not yet rolled out because of some concerns about giving it to children as young as 2. So DCGI is yet to roll out, but hopefully by the end of the month or Jan, they are expecting to roll out the Covaxin for the population. Also, the Zydus vaccine has been studied in 12 years and above. So that also is just awaiting rollout. So I think these are in the final stages of the DCGI approval. The other vaccine which is in the pipeline for children is by the Serum Institute in India, which is the Covovax, which is going to be for children 7 years and above. So there are trials underway of this, and they're hoping to publish their data by January and then take it forward. So even though it has been approved by the special committee, it is not yet got clearance. It is still in the last phases, and all the data has been submitted to DCGI. In India, we are waiting, and hopefully by the early next year, we can see a rollout of these vaccines for our children.
So as of now, what age group of children are eligible for COVID-19 vaccine as per the CDC guidelines?
Yeah.
And what are eligible as per the Indian guidelines? Could you reiterate on that, please?
So Indian guidelines, so that's what I'm saying. India has not yet released the vaccines for the children. So we have a platform which says the special committee has said, expert committee has said that they have approved by the data submitted to them Covaxin for 2 years and above, and the Zydus vaccine for 12 years and above is what is soon going to be hopefully finally approved by the DCGI, and they can roll it out as part of the vaccination program. And the CDC has approved the Pfizer for 5 years and above.
Right. So the CDC has approved the COVID vaccine for children of aged 5 years and above. But in India, there has been a lot of discussion about the right age. As of now, 12 years and above is accepted. But we must appreciate, I think, I've seen the panel discussions of Indian Academy of Pediatrics and even with renowned epidemiologists and ICMR people. So they have said that given that a lot of people around the world have started giving the vaccine to children, they are monitoring. They are not going to jump to start giving vaccines to the children. They are not acting in haste. They are observing, and then they will bring out the guidelines. They believe that since the children up to 5 years of age, anyway, they keep getting viral infections 5 to 6 times each year. And about 30% of that infection or that affliction is with coronavirus family. So the children are having some level of immunity to COVID as well. And they have found that it is not as serious. The disease severity was not found. COVID disease not found to be very severe in children. So they have decided to not jump into and have a knee-jerk reaction. Just because the CDC has started it, we will start it. No, I think that's very wise of them. And we are all going to keep our eyes on what guidelines they bring out for us next. So I would like to ask, okay, ma'am, Dr. Pratibha, maybe you can take this question. Dr. Anant Krishna from Chandigarh is asking, it was observed that there was an increased incidence of thrombus formation with AstraZeneca vaccine. Does the risk increase with a booster? Would you like to take that, ma'am?
So interestingly, that is whatever studies that we have, I have not documented that. Now we have limited studies on, Covishield as a third booster. Most of our studies have been on the mRNA vaccines as a crossover from the Oxford vaccine. Also in India, there is very limited data available of a crossover from Covishield to Covaxin as a second dose, not even as a booster dose. So that is what it is. Unofficially, Serum Institute, Mr. Poonawalla and his employees, a large portion of his employees have received the third dose of the Covishield as a booster already. He has given it on compassionate grounds. So we have not seen any significant data coming out of any adverse effects from that, because I'm sure it would have come out in the media at least if there was some serious incidence of increased coagulopathy in that aspect. So we don't really have, to my knowledge, we don't have many studies on third dose of the Oxford adenovector virus vaccine. And I think from whatever overall data that we have is considering the maximum number of people in India have received the Covishield vaccine, which is the same as the Oxford vaccine. I don't see a large percentage of our patients having had these clotting, incidents of reported side effects of a clotting disorder. I mean, I don't know what the rest of the panel has to say about it, but I think our percentage of this specific side effect has not been reported to a large extent, at least to that extent to cause concern.
On this, I would like to say that when the early reports on thrombotic events with Covishield or the AstraZeneca vaccine came out, 5 European countries behaved with a knee-jerk reaction, and they reacted. And they stopped Covishield or the AstraZeneca non-biotic committee known as committee over there. So they did that. But in India, we did not report such events. Also, I would like to mention here that even in the data that they reported, the stroke incidence was lower than the background stroke incidence in the community, which means for the same level of people in the community without exposure to COVID, without having gotten the COVID vaccine, the rate of those people or stroke in that community or that group of people would be higher. So if for a background rate which was higher compared to what the group of people who received vaccine then reported in that group, which means that we could not attribute those thrombotic incidents to the vaccine.
Yes.
So this came out later on. It was realized. India, however, again, did not have a knee-jerk reaction. India continued to vaccinate people. That is why by about mid-November, we had vaccinated more than 70% of our population with at least one dose of vaccine. So that tremendous rollout was only possible because we continued. Had we shown that sort of doubt and stopped, we would have been in a difficult position today, maybe. Also, I would like to report that all the countries where those thrombotic incidents were reported, they had used the AstraZeneca vaccine, which was manufactured in the European units and European institutes only. It was not, the batch they received was not from India. So we we did not have to withdraw any batch in India. And the thrombotic event concern was finally found to be unfounded. All right. So I would like to come to the next question. Okay, so next question is for Dr. Tanushri. Dr. Tanushri, is there any difference in the vaccine doses or for the children and adults?
Ma'am, if I have to consider not the Indian scenario, if we have to consider the CDC scenario in US, which are implementing the vaccinations in children per se, as ma'am has already said, the 5 years and above are eligible for vaccination with Pfizer. Rest of the vaccinations are not eligible for the less than 18 years of age group. And in that scenario, only in the 12 to 18 years of age group, the dosage is same as per the adult dose, whereas from 5 to 11 years of age group, they have recommended the age appropriate dose, which is calculated as per the age. There's a specific formulation of the weight and all. So after that, the dosage is calculated for 5 to 11 years of age. So, but the difference in the duration is the same as per the adult. That is the duration, that is 6 months for the booster dose. That is there as per the adults also, but the dosage vary accordingly in the Pfizer age group.
Thank you, Dr. Tanushri.
Yes.
So I would like to take this next question. This question, Dr. Tanushri, could you take this? This question is from Dr. Mohan from Karnataka, Bengaluru. He's saying that we have lost more than 1,000 plus doctors so far. Practicing doctors, do you think that practicing doctors need to be given the booster as quickly as possible, as the immunity starts to wane by third month. Do you think we are all at risk?
Yes, ma'am, definitely, because most of our colleagues were vaccinated in the months of, I think, from the January we rolled out the program. So from January and February were the majority time where most of our colleagues got vaccinated. So now we are already about 10 to 12 months from that time. So seeing that if we are having newer variants around and it's a question, they are of questionable virulence and mortality risk, so definitely healthcare worker is some subgroup that needs to be prioritized because we are the one which are facing the danger firsthand. So I would definitely recommend the doctors age group should be the doctors all white, especially the ones who are frontline workers. They need to be given the booster shot as soon as possible.
Thank you, Dr. Tanushree. Dr. Stuti, I would like to continue with Dr. Tanushree's concerns that erupted from the last question. Do you think the boosters will be helpful in preventing infection from the newer variants? With all our concerns regarding Omicron and newer variants which are emerging with higher number of mutations, do you think the boosters will be able to help and protect and prevent disease?
Ma'am, the efficacy of vaccine sort of would also depend on the variant that we would be seeing. Like we have had a meta-analysis which was published in Lancet by Dr. Deborah Cromer, and when they compared the alpha, beta, and the gamma variants, they found that although the mean neutralizing antibodies were comparatively less against these newer variants, but it was still sufficient to prevent the severe disease and hospitalization, which I should say is the primary goal of the immunization. The immunization will not prevent the asymptomatic and mild disease. The goal of immunization, as per the WHO and all the leading population, is to cut down the severe diseases and the hospitalization and death related to COVID. So the initial data that we had seen, and even after the multiple passes that we have seen of pandemic, although we have huge number of cases coming up, but the mortality has definitely dropped down. The number of people with severe diseases, the number of people dying, like the initial thing that we saw in, especially in Italy, the mass graves when the pandemic first hit them, that thing has really worked back with the vaccines. So the vaccines have been effective till now against the newer variants, maybe at a lesser efficacy, but if we are achieving a goal of mass communication, so in combination with that herd immunity, they had been helpful. There are definitely concerns regarding Omicron because the specific thing about Omicron is it has 50 mutations and 26 are unique to the one which on the main region, on the RBD region, against which these vaccines are producing antibodies. So there are a lot of concerns regarding the Omicron variant, whether the vaccine would be helpful or not. But it had been helpful against the other variants. So Dr. Stephen Bensel, who is the CEO of vaccine maker Moderna, also had given a press statement almost 2 days back, where they are saying that they are anticipating that there would be a drop in efficacy with the Omicron variant. But yes, we have had enough data to prove that it was good enough to prevent the serious hospitalizations with Delta, Beta, Gamma, and other variants.
Thank you, Dr. Stuti. I would also like to hear Dr. Pratibha's opinion on this. Dr. Pratibha, you are from Mumbai. Mumbai has seen some very, very bad waves. And given that we are seeing the global trend of spikes in Russia, in China, coming out with partial lockdowns, or maybe full lockdowns, we never know the whole picture when it comes to China. News always comes later. And with the new concerns about Omicron, does this influence our decision while ordering or advising a booster dose for healthcare workers, ma'am, and also for the general population at large? How do you look at this?
I think there is already work being done by the Serum Institute looking at the efficacy of Covishield against this new variant, which is a variant of concern, and hopefully they shall release some data soon. Serum Institute has already applied to DCGI for approval for Covishield as a booster for high-risk population, as has the new vaccine, which is the RBD vaccine from South, the biotech group. They have also applied for to DCGI for approval for the booster after the primary doses of Covishield. So let's see where there are meetings on at the central government regarding the booster vaccination for high-risk population and healthcare workers. And I think by the end of the month, we will have some information as to the way going forward. But from what I am understanding, I think probably if the Indian government does release guidelines on the booster doses, we will probably follow the same schedule that we started with, which was high-risk population, healthcare workers, followed by, so similar to what UK did when they started their booster doses. So I think that would be the way going forward, because this is a population which has received their doses more than 6 months ago, right? And that is whatever data is there, we are saying is that after 6 months is when probably the immunity starts waning. So probably that again would be logically the first, schedule going forward about the category of people who may get recommendations for getting booster doses.
So I would like to add here on the same line of thought, that when we say that will the booster help or not against the new variants, I think when Delta came in, there was a concern that it is more resistant to the vaccine-induced antibodies. It is more resistant to the post-convalescent sera. So newer variants, they have been more resistant. Omicron or maybe any other certain variants to come in future, they may be more resistant. But what we also know that even though Delta was 2 times more causing 2 times more severe disease, patients who were vaccinated were still protected and saved from hospitalization and severe disease. So this ultimately again comes down to the same level, that for the newer variants, as of now, whatever we have seen for the variants which have come out, is that the vaccine has not been able to prevent infection, but has prevented serious disease, severe disease and death, has prevented hospitalization. And also, while it could not stop the person contracting the disease, and we have data for the Delta virus, people who contracted COVID had Delta virus and who were vaccinated, they continued to transmit the disease. They continue to transmit the virus, but compared to people who were not vaccinated, they transmitted the virus for shorter periods of time.
Yes.
So vaccines prevent disease and they prevent transmission of disease also in the community. Dr. Pratibha,
yes,
what would be your advice regarding booster dose when it comes to domestic travel or people planning international travel?
So I think Covaxin has now finally got WHO approval. And though I think regulatory bodies in Europe and specifically have not yet released any statement regarding Covaxin, to the best of my knowledge. And I think in between a couple of weeks ago, there was also some news reports about Europe saying eligibility of travel if you are more than a year older of having received the second dose. There was some question about that as well. So I think maybe eventually, I don't know whether it is propagated by the vaccine industry or what, but I guess eventually if those kind of rulings do come out, we will be looking at people who need to travel will need booster doses. So I think, specifically talking about booster, I don't know how we are going forward, but I guess, a lot of people who decided to also decide to take, who had initial vaccine hesitancy, then decided to take the vaccine, chose Covishield, because Covaxin, unfortunately, for the longest time, did not get permissions for international for travel to certain countries. So I guess a lot is going to be dictated by how the scenario is in the rest of the world and where one would like to travel.
I think it's very valid what you just pointed out. As of now, US or UK have not mandated a booster.
Yes.
They have, however, mandated authorized or accepted vaccine as per US and Europe. And for people who are traveling, the decision to give them a booster will depend on their risk. Are they going to a place which is having a high risk of COVID? And what are the comorbidities? What are the age group? Is the patient on any immunosuppression? Is the patient having any comorbidity? So these are the factors, be it domestic travel. And if the domestic travel is the patient going to a place which has again got higher caseload of COVID. So I think these are the factors which we would probably take into consideration when deciding if a person who's planning travel, whether he should get a booster or not.
And which one?
That's really an excellent point, ma'am. And I think that's what we really need to focus, that things should not be like forced fate. Like it should not be that someone has to go somewhere and that's why they're forced to take
More
booster.
of a
It should be
political
like,
rather than clinical.
yes, it
actually.
has to be patient's individual health decision in concert with his doctor, and we cannot take the autonomy out of patient's hand. Things should not
Unfortunately,
just be.
that is what is happening, no? With this the whole scenario in the world. It's unfortunate that some of the countries are deciding what happens with the rest of the world.
Yes, and that's kind of sad, and I think
That is
that's
kind
why
of
we
sad,
need
yeah.
more of WHO-like agencies
Yes.
to have a stand against it.
Yeah.
And ma'am, what ma'am said was like really well. It should be a clinical decision and not a occupational or a political decision.
Yes.
That's a very valid point, ma'am.
I think in that sense, as I said first earlier also, that the fact that Indian government has not jumped to just bring out a quick guideline, booster in US or booster in India. I think they are being wise. And the fact that they're taking time to evaluate, I think that's well founded.
And I would really like to congratulate the policymakers in not rushing into any decision. This is a decision which concerns million, and I would really like the government to take time and come up with an advisory which is good and something which gives people option. So that would be a very
with the option, what is also very important is a greater level of awareness, so that people can make the best decision and the best informed decision.
Yes.
So I would like to come to Dr. Tanushri. Dr. Tanushri, when I was talking to Dr. Pratibha about the international travel and the patient traveling, I think one thing that I would definitely recommend is that the patient, he should get an influenza vaccine. So he should plan that because it's that time of the year. Now, I would like to ask you that can we combine influenza vaccine and COVID vaccine or a COVID booster?
Ma'am, if you ask my own clinical experience, I have given a time frame of around 2 to 3 weeks to my patient. Initially, when there was no data available, they were simultaneously patient getting vaccinated for COVID and so also asking for an influenza shot, which was due for them. So I used to keep a safe distance so that immunogenicity and the response and all overlap was there. So, but as I have gone through the literature recommends that both the vaccines can be given together. There is no issue of issuing them separately. They can be given, the both shot can be given together.
But I think our guidelines still mention, unfortunately, a gap of Indian guidelines have not changed their.
Yeah, they have still have a stand that
they still have a tag.
But internationally, they have been recommending that both the shots can be given together.
Correct.
So there's a question from.
Following the same.
Yeah. So there's a question from Dr. Tridip Chatterjee, who's a very senior pulmonologist and a very respected pulmonologist. Sir is asking, he's from Mumbai, he's asking there's 28-day gap between 2 doses versus the present 90-day gap between vaccine in healthcare workers. Any difference in recommendation of booster? So what he's basically asking is that somebody got a booster, got the second dose at 2 months' time, or somebody got the second dose at 1 month's time. Now, the second dose, somebody got at 84 days' time. Generally, healthcare workers got max, I think, by 60 days' time. So he's asking that, given that there's a difference in the time period between first dose and second dose for healthcare workers, would there be any difference in advisory regarding a booster, timing of the booster? Who would like to answer this? Can Dr.
Let's Stuti answer.
Yes, please.
Yeah. She's been quite quiet.
Dr. Stuti, please.
Ma'am, even if we go for the booster, then I think 6 months period is good enough. Even they have received 2 doses, maybe even at 28 doses apart, 28 days apart, they still have good about immunity. And even if the immunity is waning, it will take some time to completely go off. It's not like this just because they have taken it in the 28 days gap, the immunity would go away faster. So I think even if the booster is recommended for such people, it should be taken at least at the gap of 6 months. Because if we go by that logic, now you take a booster, again in the next 6 months, you would have a immunity that has waned off. So you can't keep taking a booster again and again. There has to be some credible time limit. It's not like it's not like your vitamin D tablet, which is to be taken weekly or something like that. So I think a credible amount duration has to be given to let the body also get off the antibodies and then only to be given a booster shot. So whatever it is, at least a 6 months gap should be there.
So what I understand from what you said, Dr. Stuti, and coming to answer Dr. Tridip's question, is that whether there's a gap of whatever be the gap between your first and second dose, the time that we begin to measure is that from the second dose onwards, 6 months. 6 months post your second dose is when a booster would be advised as per the CDC guidelines. I'm again stressing on the fact that CDC guidelines, because we have still not received Indian guidelines. So, ma'am, I would like to ask this question to Dr. Tanushri, Dr. Pratibha, Dr. Stuti, all of you, if you have any thoughts of this. This is a question from Dr. Ankit Agarwal from Delhi. Dr. Ankit has asked this question so many times, and I've come upon it, so I have to. Please advise regarding whether to take booster dose during pregnancy, and if yes, when is the right time? So, Dr. Ankit, would anyone want to answer? Should I answer?
There's no data on this, right, Kirat?
So the thing is, Dr. Ankit, the fact is, as of now, CDC has not given any advice regarding vaccine for COVID during pregnancy. And it's the primary vaccination itself that we would count on to protect the mother and the child and the baby or the fetus during this time. So it's only the same guideline for the primary vaccination, but no guideline on a booster as of now from CDC. And Indian guidelines are yet to come, but from CDC also, there are no guidelines on a booster during pregnancy. All right, so I would like to, this is a question from Dr. Meena Hingorani from Vashi, Navi Mumbai, Maharashtra. She says, Dr. Meena Hingorani, she says, we do not follow FDA or CDC guidelines. Our task force gets some guidance from these guidelines, but our advisory decides for our country. So this is not a question, basically. This is her remark. So yes, Dr. Meena, you are absolutely right. We are waiting for those guidelines. So here's a question from Dr. Suryanshu Dutt Sharma, Uttar Pradesh, Bulandshahr. Again, booster should be same type vaccine previously used or switched. So we've already discussed this. So here's a question from Dr. Tridip Chatterjee. Again, he's very academic. From Maharashtra, Mumbai. He says, do you recommend doing spike protein levels in general or specific group before taking additional or booster dose? Who would like to take this googly question? Can you take this?
I've already answered it earlier. No, isn't it? I think
yes, we are not doing. So I'm yet to see a lab which is doing spike protein levels as such. We are not doing that. So no
spike protein antibody levels. I think there are some labs in Mumbai who are doing.
So he's not written antibody as such. So I
think he meant antibody levels. probably.
Okay. So here's a question, Dr. Vijay Kumar. I'm a physician. I took from Kerala, Varkala. He says, I took Covishield. Again, personalized question, sir. We do not encourage, but we'll try to answer. I got infection in August, around 6 months. I think everyone, he's saying that I think everyone after 6 months must get a booster. So basically, Dr. Vijay Kumar, he's not asking a question. He's sharing his thoughts on the topic. He says that he's a physician. He took Covishield and then he got COVID, and he says around 6 months. So he feels that everyone, especially healthcare workers, should get a booster vaccine because he got COVID at about 6 months. I think it's a fact that we have seen quite a few doctors who got COVID despite being fully vaccinated. Would you like to share your thoughts and experience on the same? Dr. Tanushree.
Yes, ma'am. Even in fact, not even that we lost some of our senior doctors. We were fully vaccinated. In fact, my hospital last COVID death was of a doctor practicing in Merit, and he was fully vaccinated in April, but we lost him in June, July end. So we can't say exactly that even after vaccination, as we are discussing, the patient might not be generating enough immune response. Similarly, so natural infection is a questionable thing. Yes, definitely you have antibodies naturally implemented, but again we are facing variants which are having mutations. They might be escaping your immunity antibody levels. So booster is a vaccine which is augmenting.
Your internet is not very smooth, Dr. Tanushree. We're not able to get you exactly now when you were, you got cut off. I would like to carry on with the question that I was asking you, because the similar question has been asked by Dr. Geetanjali Panda from Odisha, Cuttack. She's asking, if a person gets natural infection after full vaccination, would he be eligible for booster dose? Maybe Dr. Stuti, you could answer this, since Dr. Tanushree's reception is not too good as of now.
Ma'am, I would like to answer this on the basis of two facts. Like, first of all, what sort of infection was it? Whether it was a mild, moderate, or severe? If severe and moderate, did patient receive any monoclonal antibodies, any immunocompromised long-term steroids, or anything of that sort? And second thing is the time that has elapsed since the infection. In case it was a mild infection, then I don't think. See, but they already had some immunity with the vaccination, and now with the mild infection, the body must have generated some more antibody. So I think it's really not that needed. It's like they have been given a natural booster dose by the god. So I don't think they really need it at the moment. Maybe yes, in future there are a lot of companies which are going for variant specific vaccines, like how we have for influenza. We monitor the strains throughout the year. The WHO does a commendable job, and they find out which are the main strains which are circulating at the moment. And maybe in the future, when we have more variant specific vaccines, when we will know that maybe this is a variant strain that is going to come up now and going to circulate more in the community, then that time maybe they can think about going for an early booster or frequent annual boosters. But I think if they have already had boosters, the primary vaccination and then infection, I don't think the vaccination is again indicated, at least up to a year. Maybe after that,
All right.
depending on the immunity status.
I would like to talk about the data that we have at hand. So for the primary data that we had for Covishield, we found that the immunity they assumed was living up to 5 to 8 months after the primary vaccination. At the same time, I would like to quote here the studies in UK which triggered the need for a booster. They found that people in long-term healthcare setting, the elderly people, those who were vaccinated and who got COVID despite being fully vaccinated, versus those who were also vaccinated, living in the same healthcare facility, but did not contract COVID, they found that there was a difference in the level of antibodies between these two groups. Those patients who had been fully vaccinated and got COVID, still got COVID, they had higher level of antibodies when they were tested later on, versus those people who had been vaccinated but did not contract COVID. So this goes on to say that people who get the disease, it is inducing some level of antibody and protection. However, I found it really interesting that Dr. Stuti mentioned that we should also consider those who got antibody therapy, antibody treatment, maybe convalescent plasma. So these set of people, we have not seen any guidelines in the CDC recommendations. Yes, I hope the Indian guidelines also look into this, and when we have the set of guidelines, we have more clarity on this. I would like to next take a question from. Okay, so the questions are moving so quickly. Is a patient with previous severe COVID eligible for booster? We cannot, I don't think that we can, there's no guideline which categorizes people as severe COVID or who have had COVID and then advising on a booster. We don't have those guidelines as of yet. What we do have, we are talking about those guidelines only. And there's this question.
Very broad approach, Kirat, what you said was correct, that there is data which says that if you've been vaccinated and had COVID, probably your immune reaction is much better than just having two vaccines alone. So I think in that case, one would probably not, there's no guideline yet, but I'm thinking that if we are not going to get our booster shot soon, one would be not very worried about this patient.
So we have this another question that they're saying that in view of the different variants and the different targets for vaccines, for different vaccines, is there any role of immunomodulators like Sepsivac for immunity boosting, immunity as an immunity booster? Dr. Pratibha, so basically, do you see any role of Mycobacterium welchi? Do you see any role for that?
There is some data which initially early last year in June, PGI had reported few cases of severe disease in which they had used the dose in active COVID disease. Then subsequently, there has been some other data from other parts of the world, including another data from Mumbai, where they have used it in patients who have not needed oxygen. So that was a milder version, but they found that these patients had faster recovery time. So there was some data to say that yes, Sepsivac, which is Mycobacterium W, could have a role in early time to recovery in this subset of patients. And then subsequently, we found some very interesting data on, which was done by the company. Even though it's a retrospective study, it was a retrospective analysis of a prospective subgroup of patients, all healthcare workers working with them, where they gave Sepsivac to see if it improved, if it decreased the incidence of being COVID positive. So they had, I think, more than 3,000 patients, out of which more than 2,000 were in the case arm and the rest were in the control arm, who did not receive the Mycobacterium injection. And they found that there was definitely a 70% I think protection from contracting COVID. And as per what WHO says, for any substance to be called as protective or to be effective, efficacy is about 50% efficacy is what WHO recommends. So this is very smaller amount of data. I think they themselves have written that there needs to be more larger randomized trials. But this sounds promising, and I think we need more RCTs going forward to look at this particular thing. There is already enough data on Sepsivac, which has been studied in acute respiratory insufficiency due to sepsis, and it has been seen that there is it has some role in improving the innate immunity of the patients, basically because it causes activation of the macrophages, which are important to decrease the binding of the virion to the host cell. So I think there is potential for this, though we need more data. I mean, I wonder what Stuti and Tanushree and Kirat have to say on this, but that would be my take on this from available literature.
Sorry, ma'am. What did
I'm saying I want to know everybody else's opinion also, because this is what is my take on the available literature. Personally, I haven't used it much, so I would like to know if any of the rest of you have used it, and what is your experience? So the whatever data we have does sound like it has potential. We need more trials.
The data that I have also gone through shows that there is promise to boost the innate immunity, and the innate immunity is going to come into action much more quicker than the vaccine. And the innate immunity is also found to have a more consistent protection. So yes, I do see a scope, and we will look forward to more studies on the same. And I would like to move on to the next question. So this is a question from Dr. Harpreet Kaur from Ludhiana. She's asking, Dr. Tanushree can take this question. Is there any validity of vaccination certificate? How long is it valid for travel? Very interesting questions we are getting. No, I'm just trying to pick up. Yes, Dr. Tanushree.
Ma'am, vaccination certificate definitely stands for the one who's asking for it and where you have to apply for. For our country, definitely, if you're traveling to the respective countries in Europe or US, if whether they are giving a green signal for our vaccine, so that is what is valid. And yes, vaccination certificate is a proof that you are fully vaccinated. Many of the industries like the travel industries and many of the employment industries and all, they're all asking for a vaccination certificate. So it's a very important document these days, I think, as good as your Aadhaar card. So definitely for travel purposes, it depends on the country where you are going to. Otherwise, a vaccination certificate is a very valid document which is required these days. So definitely it has a very important role and one should be in possession of one. And yes, definitely it's an important document these days.
I think, ma'am, only France has made it mandatory for above 65 that they have to have a booster to be able to get their health pass, which is for going into the public places in France. I think I'll look into the other countries as well, but I think for the moment, as far as my knowledge goes, France is one country where this validity sort of thing will come into play, because for above 65, they are mandatorily asking for a booster, that they had to be vaccinated. So
they are the ones. In fact, in April 21, they had issued this thing saying that for immunocompromised patients, start giving boosters. As early as April 21, they had issued some release some statements. So I mean, it's possible, which basically means we cannot go to France as of now.
Thank you.
Above 65.
Thank you, dear panelists. I would like to quickly, with the bird's view, I would like to bird's eye view, I would like to say that we have received compliments from Dr. Vibhu Quatra, Dr. Mani Maran from Tamil Nadu, Dr. Vibhu Quatra from New Delhi, and Dr. Jayaraman from Chennai. Dr. Jayaraman is saying, awesome discussion and update on COVID vaccine. Thank you, CCI. Thank you, sir. And I think I would like to call it a day, call it a discussion. And thank you, dear panelists, for updating us in such detail. And the bottom line remains that we have lost a lot of doctors in the two waves. A lot of them had been fully vaccinated when we lost them in the second wave. And even the physician who shared his experience here, that at 6 months he got COVID again, even though he was fully vaccinated. This all points towards the fact that a booster might be recommended, might be warranted, given that there is waning of immunity. And CDC has given clear guidelines regarding the waning of immunity and the requirement for vaccine in people who are at increased risk of getting contracting the disease because of comorbidity, or being at increased risk because of being at an age which is more susceptible, that is more than 60 years. And also they have recommended that the booster should be there for the frontline workers, people who are at increased risk because of increased exposure. We will, however, wait for the Indian guidelines. We do understand that the intermixing of vaccines for booster, as is known as the heterologous regime, is acceptable and has provided acceptable immunogenicity when a different vaccine from the primary vaccination is used to is used as a booster, is used to boost the immunity. So all this looks promising, and Omicron in the meanwhile has created that need to talk about booster, and we will keep on monitoring the status of things and the trend and the global trends. In the meanwhile, I think we will have the Indian guidelines very soon. And I would say that I would respect the fact that Indian government is still focusing. It is not that they have not just come out with the booster ideas or guidelines. They are still focusing on increasing the vaccine coverage. The primary vaccine coverage, I feel, is the biggest thing that if we achieve that, that would be the ultimate thing in this fight against COVID, this pandemic. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all dear panelists. Thank you to the dear audience who has been with us. Every Thursday, we continue to be dedicated to bringing the best of knowledge and the latest updates to you. Thank you very much. Good night. Thanks to our partner, CIPLA, for their continued academic support. Thank you, everyone, and a very good night. Shubh Ratri.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.